1 second. Got this here. See if it'll work. It has it on my desktop. Or maybe I'll try this one. Okay. Let's see. The screen I want is not coming up. Yay, now it's coming up. I refreshed it. Perfect. And share. Perfect. Okay. So, I already presented myself. So our plan for learning today is you get to meet Spirit Bear, you get to see who he is. I'll be sharing the story of Dr. Peter Henderson Bryce, which is then connecting to the residential school system in Canada. I then will share the meaningful story of Shannen's dream of Shannen Kustashen and School is a Time for Dreams, which is a wonderful camping that we host here at the Caring Society. I will also share Spirit Bear's plan and Spirit Bear's books that are free that you can also access for yourself too. We will then hold a group discussion if there's time, of course, too, as I really want to be respectful of what everyone also has to say. And in closing, and also if there's still time, Spirit Bear has a theme song, so we can share that too, but it's okay if not. So meet Spirit Bear. So Spirit Bear is a barrister, which means that when he sees something wrong, he needs to take the time to learn about it and then help make things right. And Spirit Bear, he also represents the 165,000 children, First Nations children at that, impacted by the child welfare system in Canada. He also represents everyone who is wanting to make meaningful differences towards reconciliation and to do so with love, care, fairness, equity, primarily love. I'm going to say love again, because that's what he really embraces and that's what he really gives to everyone. And that's why we also love him very much here at the Caring Society too. So,
Madeleine, can you put in the presenter mode, because we can see your PowerPoint, but not.
Okay.
In the top right where it says slideshow.
Okay, let's see. Sometimes I've had funky issues due to this, so I think that's why I chose to do it this way. But let's see.
Over on the top right where it says slideshow.
Top right. My apologies. I think the Zoom.
All the way to the right.
All the way to the right, to tools.
No, all the way to the right of your screen.
My screen.
Yes.
Oh, I see.
Slideshow.
My apologies. Okay, sorry. It's there it is. Yay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Perfect. Thank you so much, folks. Perfect. Yes. So this is Spirit Bear. I get to see him firsthand.
Oh shoot, I'm so sorry. I think we may have misdirected you because you've screen shared on the other one and not on the presenter mode. So maybe we'll just live through this. That'll be fine.
Okay. Okay, so can you see the presentation as is right now, for example?
We can see the presentation, yeah.
Okay, perfect. Yeah. So yeah, that's just the thing I noticed too. Okay, interesting. Okay. Well, I'll continue. So I'm going to share about Dr. Peter Henderson Bryce, and he was the man who knew better, as that's what we like to say. So he was born in 1853, and he got his medical degree at the University of Toronto in 1886. He then became the chief officer of health in 1887. And then in 1900, he became the president of American Public Health Association. 1904, then he became the chief medical officer, Department for the Interior, which means that he was then working within the government of Canada. And then when he was working in his department, he created a report linked to unequal health care funding, connecting to poor health practices to unnecessary deaths in residential schools. And then in 1922, due to his report and due to his findings, he did his best to share this with his colleagues inside the government of Canada to then help to stop what's happening to these children. And then he ended up getting pushed out of the public service for his advocacy. And then he published his work instead, and he called it a national crime. And this was also, this work is also located on the National Truth and Reconciliation Center's website. So if you actually want to read this report too, it's published there. And also he made something so important in the way where he mobilized in education. He did his best to share what was actually happening at this time, which is a time that a lot of people say, like, oh, the government of Canada didn't know what was happening in the residential schools. They knew what was happening inside the residential schools. They just chose not to do anything about it. So that's why we appreciate him at the Caring Society, because he was the man who knew better and did his best to do better for First Nations and also Métis and Inuit children too. And then with his report on the Indian schools of Manitoba and the Northwest Territories, which is commonly known as the Bryce Report, what can be connected here is it's suffice to say that of the 1,537 people reported upon, 25% are dead. Of one school, with an absolutely accurate statement of 69% are dead here too. Dr. Bryce's description of the schools shows them to be veritable hotbeds for the propagation and the spread of this disease, and this disease is alluding to smallpox and to tuberculosis too. So this was published again in the Evening Citizen on November 15th, 1907. So again, it kind of demystifies this myth yet again that people in Canada were unaware again of what was happening, when in fact there is people like him trying to share, trying to show the truth of what was happening. And again, the government of Canada chose not to do anything about it. So it was actually Duncan Campbell Scott, who was the person who said to get the Indian out of the child. And further, what he also did too, because he was the superintendent of Indian Affairs. So he worked alongside Peter Henderson Bryce. And Peter Henderson Bryce and him were very much butting heads throughout their time together when they were working together inside this department. And what he carried, being Duncan Campbell Scott, is our object is to continue until there is not a single Indian in Canada that has not been absorbed into the body politic, and there's no Indian question and no Indian department. So his goal was for the ultimate assimilation of First Nations, Métis, and Inuit children, and thus ensuring that we as people were a part of the Eurocentric society that was then becoming Canada at this time. Were they successful? No, obviously not, because we are here, we are proud, we are still sharing our voices and further sharing who we are, and we are survivors from this system. So it's really important to acknowledge these people in history, because that's how we're better able to advocate and further better able to work together too, to better meet reconciliation, if to continue this work, especially in regards to how the residential schools, how they impacted our communities in various ways. It's really important to acknowledge the clear connection to that also Cindy Blackstock, our executive director, makes too, is that the child welfare system is basically what has been mirrored from the residential schools. It's a mirroring process. So we still see our children still being taken away from our communities, and still this assimilation process is still ongoing. And that's why there's so many First Nations across Canada who are doing their best to create their own welfare systems, their own systems to support culture and language, to support families caring for their young ones, community supports, all these things. And this is all to remedy the ongoing impacts of settler colonialism. So it's really important for us to, again, acknowledge all of these things in order for us to do better, because guess what? Now we know better. So it's really important in how that interconnects inside these ways. So now that we understand the system, we understand the ongoing effects of what's happening here too, and the systemic injustices that we are still witnessing in Canada today. This wonderful, wonderful, wonderful youth advocate, Shannen Kustashian, she created, and we honor her through this creation of Shannen's Dream. And it's in loving memory for her and what she did, which has sparked a national movement for safe and comfy schools for all First Nations children. So I'm going to share the story of Shannen Kustashian now. So unfortunately, Shannen Kustashian is no longer with us. She did pass away in a car accident when she did have to go to school away from her home community because her home community didn't have a school for her to go to at this point. So that's really unfortunate. And that's why with her dream, it still lives on. And that's why we still continue to honor her in these ways. But what Shannen Kustashian did when she was living, she worked alongside her friends and they created videos of what their school looked like. And their school on their reserve was in really poor shape. Like there was an oil spill that ruined the school's integrity, the foundation. There was broken windows. There was also, it was in portables, like they were going to school in portables. And ultimately, it was just not a place where children felt like that they mattered. And they do, and they continue to. And not only this, but there's also work that she also did too in support of ensuring that her community also had clean drinking water as well. So that also connects here to caring for the land, further caring for education, caring for community inside these ways. So with what she ended up doing is that video that she took alongside her friends of the conditions of her school, they sent this video to ministers in Canada in 2008. And when they did this, some of these students alongside Shannen were able to sit with ministers as a part of the federal government. And in order for them to do that, their school also had to fundraise for them to be able to attend those meetings too in Ottawa, because they're from Attawapiskat First Nation, which is in Northern Ontario. So it took some money for them to be able to go. And when they were able to meet with the ministers, it was interesting because the things that they were hearing in return were unmeaningful. So that's why Shannen continued the work that she did alongside her friends, of course, and also alongside the community of Attawapiskat, which is ensuring that their community, no matter what, got a safe and comfy school. So, and not only their community, but for all First Nations communities in Canada to also have a safe and comfy school too. So that's why her movement lives on, because they were actually successful in what they were doing and what they were achieving and what they were fighting for is for that safe and comfy school. So this inspired so many kids, not just First Nations kids, but all kids across Canada to also participate, to also share their voices in solidarity, to also know that their voices can make a difference. And that's why we still see this campaign still being used as well by various other First Nations communities too, who are also trying their best to also get a safe and comfy school on their reserve too. So that's how Shannen's Dream continues to live on. And I do have a quick video to share. I do hope that the sound works, but we'll see. So we're just going to test this out. Can you hear it?
I think you'll have to restart the screen share and click the little button that says share your sound.
Okay. Let's see. Screen share. Oh, perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Okay. It says to share your computer audio, please install the Zoom audio device. Okay, it's okay.
Oh,
I could share this link after with you folks. But ultimately it shares what you can do to participate in Shannon's stream and further with Schools, A Time for Dreams. So it gives us ideas of how we can do this in a good way. So let's see here. So, and this is a really important note too, schools on reserves, which are funded by the federal government, because that's how they get their funds, get significantly less funding per student than provincial and territorially funded schools. So that's why there's still inequities that are facing First Nations on reserves too. And that's really important to acknowledge. And further, First Nations children and youth across Canada are denied a proper education and adequate support because they are First Nations and living on a reserve. And therefore, that's discrimination happening and continuing to happen. So this is why Shannon really believed in safe and comfy schools, and further for Shannon's dream, because she wanted every single child, every single First Nations child, to believe in the fact that they could all live their dreams. And therefore, Schools, A Time for Dreams invites people from all over the country to support equitable education for First Nations and all young people living in the country. So number one, this is something that you can do. You could promote Shannon's belief that every kid deserves to live their dream with the When I Grow Up and I Want to Be sheet that we do have. This is a really great child and youth activity in particular, so that they can see themselves manifesting and believing in themselves to achieve their dreams too. You can also share your dream with others, for example, in your classroom or further with your organizations. You could do so on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. You can use the hashtag Shannon's Dream, rêve de Shannon, parce que c'est aussi en français. You can also learn about Shannon's Dream in your classroom and organization, just like what I'm sharing with you today. You can also lead this work yourselves too, because with our website, we actually share a lot of supporting information and education, sharing and mobilizing this education, because it's just so important. And you can also host a Shannon's Dream Party. Again, this is really great for being targeted for children and youth and being able to participate inside these ways. Last and not least, this is the one that's key that everyone can certainly do. And you could send letters to your elected officials and help raise awareness so that all young people in Canada can live their dreams. So that's what takes us to not only what Shannon has done, but also what Cindy Blackstock shares too in regards to the Spirit Bear plan. And now you know who Spirit Bear is. Spirit Bear created a plan. He calls attention to policymakers, to public officials, to the Canada system and their departments and how they're also running too. And what he calls on is for Canada to immediately comply with rulings that were laid out by the Canadian Human Rights Tribunal in connection to Jordan's Principle, but then also in regards to child welfare and their services. For the Parliament to ask Parliament Budget Officer to publicly cost out the shortfalls. And this then connects to education shortfalls too, which is really important to pay attention to. And also share this information with the whole public, but then also certainly with First Nations children, youth, and families, so that everyone can bear witness and actually see this as well. For the government to also consult with First Nations to co-create, again, that's key, co-creation, to implement the Spirit Bear plan and to end all the inequities of the shortfall period of time-sensitive children's best interest. This could connect to their health, their safety, their well-being, which again connects to Jordan's Principle too. And I can also share a little bit more information with you at the end of this presentation about what Jordan's Principle is. And then also for government departments, providing services to First Nations children and families to undergo through independent 360 evaluation. That's really key to identify any ongoing discriminatory ideologies, policies, practices, and then to end them. And then also for all public service servants, this is also connected to call to action number 57, is to receive mandatory training to identify and address government ideology that might be connected to settler colonialism, and further their policies and practices that that do not respond to the calls to action, of which are really important to respond to. So this is what his plan ultimately is, and it supports, again, education, the mobilization of education, and further how everyone can also hold the government accountable too inside these ways. Because the root of our work, the root of what we care so deeply about here at the Caring Society is children. Children, children, children. They're our future. So we ought to be doing our best for them to make sure that they're going to be safe, healthy, supported, cared for, and most importantly, that they feel like that they matter, because they do. In relation to children and youth too, we have, and if there's any children and youth in your life as well, we have so many wonderful resources that are free. They are accessible online. And they connect to various things that I've talked about in this conversation with you today, connecting to, for example, for Spirit Bear's first book, which is right here, Spirit Bear and Children Make History. This connects to the story of the Canadian Human Rights Tribunal and also with Jordan's principles. So you get to a little bit more of that background understandings, and also it's written in a child-friendly way so that children can also understand these concepts too. Spirit Bear Fishing for Knowledge, Catching Dreams. This is a story about Shannen Kustashun, of which I've also shared with you today too. So it also makes it in a way that, again, children and youth can understand in meaningful and deeply deep ways for them to. Spirit Bear Honoring Memories, Planting Dreams. This is his third book, and it connects to the to a campaign we host here at the Caring Society called Honoring Memories, Planting Dreams. And it usually happens in the months of May and June. And what we support and ask is for for all people living in Canada to plant a heart garden. And inside their heart gardens, they can write their promise of reconciliation and then plant it. So it makes it connected to, again, what we try to envision and taking care of the land, and then further how the garden itself represents reconciliation, because you also need to tend to it ongoingly in caring ways. So that's what that book shares. And also Spirit Bear Echoes of the Past. It also shares, but I also, again, conceptualized at the beginning of this presentation with Dr. Peter Henderson Bryce, and how we ought to know history in order to do better together and be able to work together in these ways. Perfect. So I just want to be respectful of time. So I am happy if we can hold a discussion about the things that we chatted about here. Yes, and the age group, I would suggest probably at grades 3 to 6. But if there's key things that you want to talk about from the books with like really young ones, like being like 4 to 7-year-olds, for example, you can definitely do that too. You just got to be very focused. Great. And then, yeah, so we can hold like a collective conversation here. So, and also this helps me to better how I can also better prepare presentations in my future too, just to make sure, everyone feels supported and also well educated about these ideas. So what are you going to take away from this presentation? What do you plan to implement, what you have learned? And do you have any questions for us here at the Caring Society too? As again, you're more than welcome to ask us even after this presentation if you're uncomfortable sharing it in a group. I can also share my email as well, and you're more than welcome to ask me in that individual way too.
Merci Madeleine, c'est une très belle présentation. On a comme des questions, we have like question in the chat box. C'est posé en anglais, donc tu peux répondre en anglais. So I will give the mic to Rhonda.
She already answered it, but I really like this idea because some of the times when I talk to kids about reconciliation or history, they start to tune out because they're just like, this is so depressing, I don't want to talk about it anymore. And so in doing it through story is a really nice way of introducing some of these concepts to the youth in a more like age appropriate way of discussing it. So I am definitely going to be checking that out.
Yay, that makes me happy to hear. That's what we're trying to do too, is just to make this information more more connected to the kids too, so that they can also know that they can participate as well, right? Because it's ongoing and it's living and it's still our experiences. So when kids are able to connect with that in that way, oh goodness, like what Cindy likes to say, oh, I think I actually included the quote, or it might be in another presentation that I might have done. But she likes to say is that kids are the barristers of love and fairness. So she shares that because kids truly are, and they're amazing at being able to stand up for what is right. They're usually better at it than adults sometimes too. So that's why we really do care about kids and taking up these campaigns and this really important work.
Thank you. Another question, I think in the chat box, is Jordan. She said that are this book available in the store in New Brunswick?
Yes. So you're welcome to purchase these books through Indigo Chapters. You can also check with your local bookstores too. If your local bookstore does not have it, you can actually get them to connect with us. And then we can also see if we can make those books available at that bookstore. So yeah, it's a fun process. I've been learning a lot about publishing and the way that works. So yeah, just check in and see. And if not, get them to contact us and then we can make that happen for you.
Thank you, Madeleine. Last question before. Okay. I think everything is clear. Donc, merci vraiment comme Madeleine. On en a appris plus sur le First Nation Society. Puis tu as comme tes contacts que je veux partager avec